Hello there. This is George McLaughlin with McLaughlin and McLaughlin, and I'm going to narrate a presentation regarding project execution strategy. This particular execution strategy is targeted on large and complex industrial construction projects, as the title slide shows. This is something that we have substantial experience with for many years. Further, this presentation has been given to some fairly significant and prestigious organizations, including Project Management Institute, American Association of Cost Engineers, the Earned Value Management or Performance Measurement Annual Convention for a number of years. So this is not too new, although the dynamics constructed herein are new. This is presented as a part of the blog at Project Professionals, which for several years we've been operating. So by way of introduction, I am a principal with McLaughlin and McLaughlin. My name is George, and I have a quite a background in project and program management, as well as claims, disputes, and litigation support. So the two together tend to give you a perspective relative to the execution of large and complex projects. Now, the general subject or lessons learned are the ones you see. This particular lesson discusses execution strategy and some of the challenges associated with that. Questions. Well, normally, since this presentation is normally given live, we allow questions. But since we are doing this via the blog and internet, we'll simply ask you to email or send your comments in, and we'll deal with them in that way. Okay?
So what exactly are large and complex projects? Well, that would probably take half a day to describe in many respects, but here are just a few examples. Generally, and we'll refer to fixed price, although they can be, of course, reimbursable costs. Some of the challenges are a little different when it comes to these matters. Certainly, from a claims perspective, reimbursable costs tend to take on a different complexion. In brackets, we have some common abbreviations that are used. LSTK, lump sum turnkey, which would be arguably among the most aggressive, where you provide the facility on a turnkey basis. The EPC, engineer, procure, construct, engineer, procure, construction, manage, where the actual construction is performed by subcontractors. EPF, engineer, procure, fabricate. EPCI, engineer, procure, construct, install. EP, just engineer, procure. And there are many combinations of these particular different contracting arrangements. Now, typically the large projects, large and complex, are grassroots or greenfield, meaning we're starting not from an existing facility, but from a absolutely new field or a new site. Typically, our experience relates to both industrial or commercial, and typically in the private sector, not public. Now, these large and complex projects tend to be very long in duration. By that, I mean 3 to 4 years planned. And I say planned because They can actually, a duration of 3 to 4 years can become 6 years or more. You have under the different cases, you can advance the scope definition, or you can provide for scope based on performance requirements, and that's a function of the different strategies that the owner wishes to perform. If you're actually defining scope, then you would take the project a little further in the front end development. Typically, these contracts have bonus or penalty provisions such as liquidated damages or schedule incentives, cost incentives, perhaps quality incentives, capacity incentives, or penalties, etc. The big issue, of course, is that the interfaces can be many and complicated. And therein lies the real challenge from a managerial perspective is what do you do about all the interfaces? Typically on these sorts of projects, you have many subcontractors, 30, 40, but you certainly have half a dozen major subcontractors, perhaps more. Depending on your selected contracting and execution strategy, you may do free issue equipment and materials. And this is part of the managerial challenge. And there are many other factors. Now, normally I would ask the group to provide suggestions, but in this case, again, if you would like to comment, please send those comments along.
Now, one of the major managerial challenges associated with complicated projects and complicated execution strategies relates to the interfaces between stakeholders. In this particular case, let's assume that you are prime one or the prime contractor. And so this will discuss sort of the interfaces. Now, obviously you have interfaces regarding your subcontractors as on big projects you will have as many subcontractors as 20, 30, even more, and maybe half a dozen or more could be major subcontractors. So that'll be a significant managerial challenge. Then you have major vendors, which are going to supply engineered equipment, other types of equipment, and bulk materials such as pipe, concrete, rebar, electrical cable, and so forth. So that's sort of your view looking down the organization. Then you will have an important interface with the owner looking or facing upward in the organization. And then the owner may choose to select and use additional prime contractors, so you'll have interfaces with those. The owner may decide to purchase and then free issue equipment, particularly where there are long lead items. So therein lies yet another potential interface. IPA, or Independent Project Analysis, is one of the most influential organizations in the world when it comes to the execution strategy of industrial projects. What I show you here is simply a screenshot of their website, and you see a picture of the one of the founder, or the founder, Mr. Merrow, Edward Merrow. Mr. Merrow and his colleagues have been very influential in shaping the execution strategies in the past and going forward, along with other key elements in project delivery. Now, Mr. Merrow, as I mentioned, one of the founders of IPA, has published a very interesting book. Here we picture a cover of it, and I have acquired this book, have read it. It's very interesting, and frankly, if you're a student or a practitioner in project management of large projects, particularly large and complex, this is a good document for you to review. One of the most interesting have to do with the execution strategies, wherein Mr. Merrow in his book suggests that the industry is moving towards what he calls a mixed strategy, and in that mixed strategy you find owners taking on an increasingly relevant and involved role in major projects, basically a construction management sort of role. It further introduces an interface between engineering and procurement and construction. Certainly we would expect that this sort of arrangement could lead to a disruption to the orderly execution of the project. So in reality, what are the implications, the changes, the dynamics going on relative to project execution strategy? If we can, here is a block diagram showing the manner or the organization with which projects were executed and have been executed for many decades. So you see the owner and the owner project management team, and then we see one contractor, typically called an EPC, a turnkey, EPCM perhaps, contractor, with a contract that basically obliges the prime contractor to deal with all of the issues. The liabilities typically flow from one contractor to the owner's project management team. We note in the yellow arrows that things flow in interfaces, but these interfaces are internal to the EPC contractor. These items flowing across the interface include the items you see listed here. Importantly are documents. Importantly, we have equipment that has been acquired by the EPC contractor, bulk materials somehow acquired, etc., etc. So what happens once we start changing the execution strategy? The first change that we see is a move to simply place the engineering and procurement under one contract. Let's call it the EP contractor, and and thereby creating interfaces, major interfaces between the EP contractor and the construction management and the construction subcontractors. Here you see the implications of this new interface, which has major deliverables flowing across the interface. These include the ones you see listed. Most importantly are the equipment and bulk materials, which of course may be procured by the EP contractor or even the owner, and then they must flow across this interface to the subcontractors that deal with the installation, erection, and so forth. Very complicated. So what about this construction management? It could be a separate contract, but of course it would be a fee-for-service kind of contract, typically not a lump sum. So a logical change would be to make the construction management contract be part of the owner's team. And now we have a different liability structure where we see that the liability can flow from the EP contractor, liability can flow from all of the deliverables that are flowing across the interface between the EP and the subcontractors or construction contractors. And the construction management heavily falls on, in this case, the owner. And this role, of course, is something that many owners are not prepared, staffed to take on. It's classically been handled by the EPC contractor. So how do we ready ourselves for that? Well, the owner has to acquire many things. They have to, of course, their owner project management team, PMT, has to acquire, mobilize, train, administer, demobilize the whole team. A huge undertaking, major assets, major resources. And it's a problem acquiring them. Frankly, it's even a problem when you demobilize them. Where do these people go? They hang on forever. We need ways of working, standards, procedures, processes. How do we deal with things? We need contract development and contract administration, because all of these subcontracts will have to be negotiated, bid negotiated and awarded by the owner's project management team and administered, so forth. So the team has some major challenges, and these challenges, as I mentioned, are routinely not things that the owners are prepared and comfortable in doing. So what are the conclusions? What do we need to take away from this going forward? Certainly the execution strategy for large and complex projects and is certainly a key decision, and it definitely influences the ability of an organization or all the stakeholders to perform in the kind of execution strategy that has been chosen. Complicated strategies such as mixed strategies, so-called mixed strategies, create complications, frankly, and they lead to managerial challenges. They are challenges that maybe haven't been faced by the stakeholders, particularly the owners, that have been at this point what they may have seen. One of the key, if not the key, difficulties has to do with interface management. With the interfaces that have been created between engineering and procurement and individual construction packages, there is a clear challenge with managing these interfaces, and all of the project information, documents, equipment and materials that flow across these interfaces. Furthermore, we need to understand how to close these interfaces, ensure that they are carefully addressed, and interface management is a key point. And frankly, it's something that owners may not be experienced. So interface management for owners will be, and for the contractors as well, will be a key challenge. Now, the owners, of course, must prepare for this, or they should prepare for it. And that means appropriate staffing, finding people, a lot of people, to staff the owner's project management team well beyond the level of resources that they may have experienced in the past. But over and above that, It requires certain ways of working and infrastructure that owners are typically not used to dealing with. So there's a big challenge in the owners staffing up for this sort of challenge. Now, there are a lot of other issues, and we cover those in subsequent presentations. So, as they used to say in the old days, stay tuned. For more information, I suggest that you visit the website that I'm listing here, www.mclaughlinandmclaughlin.com. Since we have decades of experience in these sorts of matters and the related managerial challenges heavily on the owner side, I suggest that if you're in need of help, that you might want to reach out to us. So anyway, good luck, McLaughlin and Have a nice day, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.